I want to respond to a commenter that commented on my post where I said I don't think inmates should be allowed to have conjugal visits, and I also don't think that children should be allowed to visit inmates in prison. Hi, my name is Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed therapist. I've worked in corrections for a number of years. This commenter here says, I hear you, but the way that you speak about them, meaning inmates, makes it seem like you don't believe in rehabilitation. And the reason why I wanted to do a video about this is because it may seem like I'm firm, or I might have, to the layperson, it might seem like I have a lot of negative views. Like I would not allow, conjugal visits and things like that, pet programs and things like that. I wouldn't do it. One is I'm coming from the experience where I've actually worked in an institution. And I can't say that I've worked in all institutions, but I've worked in institutions. And not only that, but I've worked with a number of colleagues cross institutions, if that makes sense. I've said this on a number of posts. Prison is like a microcosm of what goes on in the real world. And so it's really more of a top-down system. And I think rehabilitation can run really well if that is the goal for a United States prison system. However, in my experience, I found more and more that it was not the goal, which is why I chose to get out of it, because I felt like I was the only person that wanted and believed in rehabilitation, or I was one of few where that's not the goal of the people who are the systemic goal, the people who are actually in charge of running institutions and the heads of institutions and things like that. And if you look at it like a microcosm, a top-down approach, you could say the same thing for the United States, a top-down approach. Who's in charge of making the big decisions? It's the politicians, it's the president, and then the other people that run down, the other people that come down below him. And so the United States is only going to run as well as the people who are in charge of making those decisions. Same thing for the prison. It's only going to run so well. And even if you are a person that tries to do things fairly, equitably, if it's a systemic issue, it's not going to run well. And if the goal isn't rehabilitation, it's not going to run well. And I would say that the goal isn't rehabilitation. When I left my institution, one of the things that they wanted us to stop doing is to stop focusing on the reasons that inmates were incarcerated. So if they were incarcerated for sex crimes, murder, drug offenses, stop focusing on that. That's the whole point of rehabilitation, is to focus on what got you there and what's going on in your world that you feel like you have to focus on those offenses. That's a big deal, and people really need to be concerned about that. That's a huge deal, and they wanted us to focus on just treating mental health issues. And in mental health issues does not mean personality disorder traits. It means stuff like depression, anxiety, and things of that nature. When you're talking about a criminal population, that's not really realistic, and that's doing these men and women, a huge, huge disservice. So much so that they're not going to have any real sort of skill sets when they get put back out into the streets and in the real world with people like you and me, and just walking around. And I'll tell you what, in our state, California, Gavin Newsom did a thing where if inmates with nonviolent offenses, they could go to classes and get their sentence reduced. And they could they can get out of prison and go back to life much, they could essentially fast track their way. And I think that's something that's still in place from our governor. Do you know how hard it is to motivate these men to actually get invested in going to a class so that they can get out? There's a lot of men in there that just don't care. The other thing is too, you have to have programs and things like that to have in place. You also have to have a people-centered approach. just like politicians, same thing for leadership in prison. Leadership is often very far removed and disconnected from the people that they're actually serving. They are focused on the numbers. They're focused on, making a name for themselves and climbing the ranks. And oftentimes, when somebody is interested in climbing the ranks, that means the people in the institution, both inmates and staff, they're collateral damage. Nobody really gives a shit about that. It's just about what makes me look good. So that means I'm going to overwork clinicians, underpay them. I'm going to get a higher number of guys in there, and I'm going to do all these things. A lot of times, that is unethical or that borders ethics, and often leads to burnout. Often leads to clinicians saying, you know what, I'm not putting up with this anymore. I'm not coming to work. Forget it. I'm out. And that is a direct reflection. So you have to look at the programs that actually focus on rehabilitation. And if you're not addressing criminal behaviors, that's going to manifest in every single program that you're doing, which leads to a lot of programs that are shut down. San Quentin is our satellite prison. In satellite just means that they're good for television. So a lot of times, whenever they show prisons on television, it's usually coming from San Quentin when it's in California. So they get all of the funding and the programs, but essentially that is because they're front facing towards media. That is the prison representative when it comes to California, but that's not very realistic when it comes to most institutions in California. So while it sounds good, pet programs, what are they doing with pets? Sometimes they're smuggling in drugs and using pets for things that they're not supposed to do, which leads to programs getting shut down or put on pause. Conjugal visits, what are they doing? You have people that are doing things that they're not supposed to. They're smuggling in things. Women are getting killed in conjugal visits. Those are visits that are not supervised. Same thing when kids are brought into the institution. You might be thinking that your inmate husband or wife is visiting with your child, but guess who's beaten off to that child? And I hate to be graphic. Guess who's looking at that child? And your husband, your wife could be full well knowing about it and be making a profit off of it or getting something out of it to have their child on display. Not only that, guess what they were doing over the past week and who they've been buddied up and had a relationship with. They might be your boo for a conjugal visit, but they're married or essentially wifed up or booed up with somebody else inside the institution this whole time. The most violent time in correctional system, for me, at least when I worked there, is during the springtime. We would get like a big shipment of transgenders. And guess what's happening? When they're brought in, a lot of people are fighting over who gets access to what transgender and who that transgender gets housed with, because that's how much they're highly sought after. And while you're thinking that your person is being faithful to you, they're out there fighting for something else that has nothing to do with you. So I actually do believe in rehabilitation. However, I believe in the way that the system is currently set up across the board. It is not structured for actual true rehabilitation. We're there to manage people while they're there, and then when they get out, good luck. If they get out, good luck to you and good luck to everybody else. And I don't care if you're wifed up with one. I don't care if one is your daddy. I don't care if one is your brother or your cousin. They're invested in telling you a bullshit story, but a lot of us who work with them know otherwise. We see it all the time. I think there could be a lot of improvements and there can be real work done. However, that's not usually the case or the focus of what leadership may want to do 100% of the time, at least not when I was there. Now, since I've been gone and since 2021, it very well could have been that things have changed, but given that my institution was on the news not too long ago, I'm pretty skeptical about it. Hope that helps to answer your question and anybody else who may think that, it's Dr. Joe. It's really not. I actually want people to succeed. That's why I come on here and talk to you all every day. but it's not what I want. It's unfortunately, it can be out of my hands.